So I'd like to set a scene for you. It's 1942, and we're in rural Ukraine. We're in a tiny little village. It's actually my mother's village, and it's called Morshin. It's right at the border of Poland and the Ukraine. We're in my mother's house, and imagine something else. There's a late-night knock at the door. My grandfather goes to answer it, but before he does, he tells my grandmother, "Take the children upstairs." And my mother, as I was told, and her 4 siblings run upstairs to hide. The way I've been told the story is that we didn't know who the men were, and they took my grandfather that night, never to be seen again. What I heard, what my mother told me since I was this age, is that my grandfather was brought into the forest and pitchforked. That night, my mother left her hometown of Morshin. This January, my mother died. She was 93 years old, and she never went back to her own homeland. My mother's life stands as a testimony to me that war does not work as a problem-solving solution. And it actually sparked, for me, a quest throughout my career the last 25 years to figure out, is there a better way to do conflict? There must be a better way to do conflict. This one really doesn't make sense to me. And so here's the thing. There's a second knock at the door right now. And that second knock is something that is so intense and so important that it is more demanding than a world war. What could that be? What could that unifying force be? Nothing short than the state of the world. Whether we call the state of the world ecosystem collapse, climate change, perhaps income disparity, gross social injustice, incredible polarization in politics, whatever name or face we put on that, it is something that we have not faced before, and it is total collapse. And I really believe, just like horses can feel that a storm is coming, we can feel this in our bones. We can feel something is not right. We understand that there are more fires. We understand that there are more storms, more hurricanes. We're watching our own forests disappear. We're watching our watersheds and our waters dry up. So this threat is real. And here's my contention for you. My belief is that we need to pull together and we need to start mediating. All of us. All of us. Before I tell you a little bit more, I have to come clean, and I think you figured it out when Kent introduced me, when I was introduced. So it's kind of like a confession. I'm biased. I'm a mediator. So you'd think I would know, and I would have this proclivity or this tendency to want everybody in this room to be a mediator. But I have a particular agenda for you. I want to spark something in each and every one of you in this room right now. And I hope by the end of this talk that you're going to feel something that might feel like an intermediator to you. Before I talk a little bit more about that, let me just say very briefly, one of the most common questions I ask when I say I'm a mediator is, okay, what does a mediator do? So let me just tell you briefly that with mediation, since I'm wanting to spark this inside of you, we come in and we help bridge differences with people. When people don't get along, when people are hating each other, they may have had the shouts and the screams and the crying and the slammed doors, or the cold, stony silence and the not talking with each other for years. Sometimes somebody like me gets called in, and we figure out a way to bridge that difference together. That's what I'm talking about when I say I want that for you. So let's think about this a little bit. What kind of intermediator could you have? Somebody like this person, Gandhi, could have that sense of wisdom and social justice and strength. Or perhaps, if that one doesn't resonate for you, what about somebody inside of you that's a type of Mother Teresa, full of compassion, full of strength, full of that capacity to fight for the underdog? Or perhaps your intermediator could be like mine. Mine is a better version of myself. But whatever type of mediator that I might be able to spark inside of you, I think the most important thing is that we pull together. And what I'd like to do is to offer you 3 key tools to help with that. So the first one is, in these times of increasing stress and chaos, really, what I'd like to invite for you is to be calm. In the mediation rooms, I've seen this time and time again. Earlier in my career, I thought what my job was as a mediator was to hang in there in the chaos, was to hang in there when people were shouting at each other and doing the running out of the room, threats, etc. And it took me a while to figure out that we're going to get much better results if I help people be calm. And as a matter of fact, there's this, borne out by brain science now, there's this pesky little thing that has been named our reptile brain, situated down in the back brainstem. And that reptile brain, what it causes is it causes us to firstly lose contact with that more resourced part of ourselves, that intermediator, if you're willing to use that as a term. And it causes us to think in black and white or polarized thinking. It starts to make us feel threatened, or it comes to fore when we are threatened. And we start to see each other as enemies. Listen for that talk, for hatred and enemies. That's not our higher selves talking then. It's our reptile selves talking right then. So let's be mindful of that, because in these times of increasing chaos, it's going to be very easy to trip up this reptile. It's going to happen, and it does happen to all of us very, very quickly. Be mindful of that. And I want to offer you a tool as you perhaps cozy up to this idea of you becoming that intermediator. And it's a Be Calm tool that I've used many times, both in the mediation room and in the classroom. So I want to invite you, if you're comfortable, it'll just be a few seconds, to either close your eyes or just avert your eyes down, whichever one. And I'd like you to put one hand on your chest, and I'd do it, oh yeah, no microphone there. One hand on your chest, yeah. And just feel what that feels like. And then the other hand on your belly. All right, so in the last piece of this work, take a breath in, a deep breath, and then exhale longer out. When you exhale longer out, you're actually engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. And now the last piece, tap your feet gently on the ground. And just notice, for some of you, you may notice something in your body, a type of release, a kind of relaxation, a kind of calm. That's calm. Thank you. You can open your eyes. Tool or practice 1. Practice 2. Listen to all sides. So here's the thing. It's quite common when I have a point of view, think, I've got the right point of view, and you've got the wrong point of view. Does that seem familiar to anybody out there? And we can get stuck in that, right? So in times not only of chaos, which I've mentioned a couple times, chaos and collapse, but another C word that's really important, the era that we're entering into, complexity. In times of complexity, we need to have that prefrontal cortex kick in. So another key piece is this idea of listening to all sides. So I'm going to tell you a little story about an elephant to illustrate this principle. So there were 6 blind men and an elephant. It's an old Sufi tale for those of you who are familiar with it. And in this story, the men are positioned in different parts of the elephant, and they all think they know what the truth is of an elephant. They've got it figured out. They know how to move this animal. So one of those men are hanging onto the leg of the elephant, and he's convinced that the truth of an elephant is that an elephant is just like a tree trunk. And he's sure, and he tells everybody else, this is it, this is reality, this is truth. And all the other blind men refuse to believe that. Well, that's ridiculous, says one from the back who's got the tail. And he says, I know the truth. And the truth, this is it. I've got the right perspective. And it's that the truth of an elephant is like a rope, and he swings the rope around and he won't let go. And I won't go into all the other perspectives, but I think you get the idea. Because with a perspective that I've got my truth and I have no room in me for any other truth, we are stuck. But if we could make that room a shift from either or to both and, it'll bring more perspectives together. So I want to offer you another tool, not as experiential as Be Calm, but it's a talking piece story. Some of you are familiar with talking pieces, and you may be familiar with circles. But the way that I've used talking pieces in my practice might be something that you could find yourself doing quite quickly. So one person holds on to a talking piece, and I will tell you, I've used talking pieces that have just been sitting on a coffee table with my daughter or in less formal situations. Sometimes, I hate to admit this, but it was like a box of Kleenex would be grabbed and put in somebody's hand. Just something that symbolizes, it's my turn to talk right now. And when that person can hold on to that talking piece and speak their piece until the other person listening can repeat it back to the speaker's satisfaction. And when that happens, you'll notice what happens when you feel understood. Your whole body, like in Be Calm, relaxes. You can be more present. And only then would you relinquish that talking piece to the other person. And that other person gets the exact same opportunity that you got to be heard. What is my reality? What does my reality over in my piece of the elephant look like? The key piece around listening to all sides is to remember that you do not need to agree to understand. That's another principle that we use in our field. You don't need to agree to understand. So you're free to understand, and please do. Listen to all sides. The third principle for your inner mediator food is to engage. To engage as if you cared. To engage as if all the world is your kin. And I wouldn't be standing here today if one man didn't decide that an individual problem was his problem as well. And I'll tell you that story, but first I just want to say there's a tendency in individual cultures to look at conflict as my problem or your problem. So if two people are fighting over there, it's their problem, not my problem. And I want to invite you to think about conflict as everybody's business. So the reason that I wouldn't be standing here today if one person didn't step forward is because of this man. So you see the blonde man in the middle of the picture? That man's name is Paul Linke. Paul Linke was one of those German soldiers that invaded my mother's village. And you see the woman to the left of Paul Linke? That's my grandmother. The man to the left of her, that's my grandfather before he was taken that night. You see, I'll tell you something. Paul Linke came to my grandfather. And he told him his life was in danger. But my grandfather said he wanted to stay behind to look after my grandmother and my mother and the children. But after the night he was taken, Paul Linke came back to my family, and he said to my grandmother, that's my mother, by the way, on to the right of Paul Linke. Paul Linke said to my grandmother, okay, now your two oldest children are in danger. Their lives are in danger. You need to let them go. And my grandmother did. And that night, Paul Linke helped my mother escape from Morshin. He helped her reunite with her eldest brother, who also escaped after the war. And he helped my mother's passage to Canada for her to settle, to be close to her brother. So I beseech you, I invite you to remember that conflict is everybody's problem. So in closing, what I'd like to invite you to do is to take up this mantle of being an intermediator. Firstly, to remember these 3 lessons, to be calm in those places where you're incited or you can feel that inner reptile starting to come alive. Secondly, I want to invite you to listen to all sides at those times when you think you've got it right. You've got it figured out. If they only understood what I understood, if they only got my perspective, please shift and listen to that other side. And lastly, please engage as if we are all kin. because my fondest hope and my dearest wish is that you see that the business of inner peace and spreading peace in the world is as much my business as it is yours. Thank you.